Hello everybody, Shrouded Hand here. This is another one of those videos where I make a sequel to a video that nobody has seen because I made it about 3 years ago and I had probably 5 subscribers back then. But you don't need to have seen the original videos to enjoy this one. In the originals I looked at convicted murderers who had made TV appearances. The footage gives us a fascinating look at a person who is hiding the fact that they've committed terrible crimes or are going to commit terrible crimes in the future. It's chilling how calm and likeable they appear to be most of the time. Often these people are psychopathic killers, and it gives us a chance to see their predatory charm in action. A lot of people gave me suggestions in the comments for other murderers who had made such TV appearances. So I collected up all the suggestions I could find and decided to check them out. So here's more real life murderers on TV shows, as suggested by you guys. A user named Indian Guy suggested the BTK killer, Dennis Rader. I never actually knew that BTK appeared on TV before he was caught, but apparently he made a brief appearance on a local TV station in 2001. Rader worked as a compliance officer at the time, and he appeared on the Kansas local news station KSN, talking about a spate of animal attacks in the area. This was filmed 4 years before his arrest, and by this time he had murdered 10 people. He nicknamed himself BTK. Bind, torture, kill, because of his love of tying up and slowly torturing his victims before murdering them. He started killing in 1974, sending taunting messages to the police with drawings of the murders. By the time this was filmed in 2001, he probably thought he was never going to be caught, and must have saw his TV appearance as another way of secretly taunting the police.
The dogs are somewhat territorial as well as vicious.
Appearing in plain sight, wearing a uniform and a badge, knowing what kinds of acts he had got away with. Unfortunately, I can't find a full clip of the footage. This clip comes from a documentary about BTK, and most of the audio comes from the documentary rather than the KSN report itself.
Dennis Rader found a new outlet for his extreme need to control.
If anyone's got a link to a better version, let me know in the comments and I'll put it in the description, but for now, this is pretty much all I can find. Bloodlocks Bathory suggested Caleb McGilvery, better known as Kai the hatchet-wielding hitchhiker. Kai led a transient lifestyle, hitchhiking around California with no fixed abode. He shot to fame in 2013 when he was interviewed about an incident where he'd saved a woman from being strangled.
This stuff right here, I was driving and I was in the passenger side of this fucker's car. Comes driving down this way. He's like, you know what? I come to realize I'm Jesus Christ and I can do anything I fucking want to. And watch this, bam! And he smashed into this fucking guy right there, pinned him in between that fucking truck. And so I hop out, I look over, the guy's pinned there. I mean, like, freight train riders know this. Like, if you get pinned between something, do not fucking move that shit, otherwise you bleed out. Like, motherfucker, I ran in, I grabbed the keys, he's fucking sitting there like nothing even happened. And like fucking like, man, if you started driving that car around again, man, there would have been a hell of a lot of bodies around here. Fucking I hop on out, and so I grabbed the bag, I threw it over by that pole right there, and then fucking buddy gets out and these two women are trying to help him. He runs up and he grabs one of them, man. Like a guy that big can snap a woman's neck like a pencil stick. So I fucking ran up behind him with a hatchet, smash, smash, smash. Yeah.
The lady said you saved her life.
She was the one who got grabbed by that fucker. You know what? Fuck is cool. That guy ain't. Shit.
When he was interviewed, he had this really enthusiastic, stoner-esque way of describing the incidents, and it caused the clip to go viral online. He became a star overnight. He became so famous that he appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Kimmel goes to some lengths to describe Kai's generous nature, and we get to learn a bit more about his lifestyle.
This afternoon, I gave you some money just for the hell of it, and what did you do with that money?
The hell of it?
I'll tell you what he did. He gave the money away immediately to someone on the street.
Yeah, I mean, the quickest way to devalue a currency is stop believing in it.
Well, I think you did it just to be nice. Isn't that true? I mean, to help people? You gave away your backpack that had all your belongings in it.
Well, no, I feel belonging with people, and, you know, like, the trees are more people and they're still alive.
All seemed to be going well for Kai. Apparently he was getting a lot of attention from his newfound fame, but a few months later he was arrested for murdering a man. Details of the murder are unclear. According to Kai, he accepted an invitation to stay at the home of 73-year-old New Jersey attorney Joseph Galfi. Apparently Joseph drugged Kai and then attempted to rape him. Kai woke up during the assault and started to fight back. Due to Joseph's age, he died during the fight. When he was interviewed, Kai maintained that he was in a drug state at the time and he had little recollection of the events. Police claim that it was a premeditated murder. Joseph had severe injuries, including facial fractures and 3 broken ribs. Kai had cut his hair and fled the state right after the killing, and this brought his claims of self-defense into dispute. He was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to 57 years in prison. Whether or not this was a fair sentence is still disputed by many people who knew Kai to be a kind and generous person. During his interview, he does mention another incident where he had to beat someone over the head.
Well, this one time I was in an orchard and this fucking guy starts beating on this woman who he calls his. So I walked on over and I started smashing him in the head. You see all these teeth marks right here for the camera? Yeah, I started smashing him in the head and in the teeth, busted out all his teeth. Motherfucking the sheriffs, not the policy enforcers, fucking show up and start like, they're like, yeah, so what happened? I mean, like, just give me any old name and just give me old fucking birthday, whatever, just, yeah.
This seems to suggest that this kind of incident happened quite often for him. Perhaps his lifestyle just got him into these situations more often than most of us. Hitchhiking around the country might mean that you have to defend yourself more often than not. Maybe he just had a violent side and he was able to hide it under his friendly surf dude persona. I'm not sure. His TV appearances aren't as creepy as the others, but this line from the Jimmy Kimmel Show does have a chilling hint of foreshadowing.
Kai the hitchhiker, everybody. Thanks, guys. And thanks for not killing me with a hatchet. Hey, everybody. We got a good show tonight.
Ernesto McSpliff suggested the professor from Gilligan's Island because he was the Zodiac Killer. I assume this is a joke, but I looked into it anyway. It turns out there really was a rumour that the actor Russell Johnson, who played Professor Hinckley in Gilligan's Island, was in fact the Zodiac Killer. According to Snopes, the rumour can be traced back to a spoof article on a satirical news site called Empire News. Apparently the article was circulated on social media as if it was true, causing a lot of people to believe that Professor Hinckley really was the Zodiac Killer. Looking at Empire News' site, it's pretty clear that it is a spoof website, so we can probably assume Russell Johnson isn't really the Zodiac Killer. On the other hand, the Zodiac Killer still hasn't been identified, so he may well have made a TV appearance at some point.
Amazing Grace and the theme from Gilligan's Island are musically interchangeable.
Pipe Dream Plumber suggests an Austrian serial killer who became a celebrity after he was released from prison, but continued to kill people. I believe they're referring to Jack Unterweger. Jack Unterweger killed a woman in 1974 by strangling her with her own bra strap. He was sentenced to life in prison, and whilst in prison he began writing an autobiographical book about his crimes. He also wrote a number of plays and poems. His writing gained popularity among various writers, artists and journalists at the time, and they claimed that it showed evidence that he was remorseful of his crimes and rehabilitated. Convinced that he was a changed man, a campaign was started to get him released from prison. In May 1990, he was finally given a pardon. He was released from prison and became a minor celebrity. 2 weeks after his release, he appeared on a talk show called Club 2. The subject of conversation was penal reform. The problem is, he wasn't reformed at all. Within the first year of his release, he had murdered 8 prostitutes, strangling each of them with their own bras. Somehow there was never enough evidence to link Jack to the crimes. Perhaps his celebrity status gave him some sort of immunity to suspicion. He continued to make TV and radio appearances as the charming, reformed criminal. In 1991, he was hired by an Austrian magazine to write about crime in Los Angeles. He was flown to California and allowed to participate in police ride-alongs of the red light district. During his time in LA, he murdered 3 more prostitutes, again strangling them with their bra straps. By 1992, police finally had enough evidence to arrest Unterweger for 9 of the murders. But all this time, journalists and celebrities were protesting his innocence, accusing police of not being able to find the real killer, and so framing Unterweger. He was eventually convicted of the crimes in 1994, and he hung himself in jail with his own shoelaces, using the same knots that he used to strangle his victims. The Club 2 clip is the only footage I can find of his TV appearances, and it's part of a longer documentary, so there's only this short dubbed clip available online from what I can see.
The truth is, with your situation, coming out of jail is completely unrepresentative of 99% of prisoners who are released.
That's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking on behalf of those 99%. I'm just one example. What happens to me happens to others, but they fail. They end up in homeless shelters, shelters for convicts, because they don't have the inner strength to fend for themselves.
There must be other footage out there because he made many TV appearances after his release. I read somewhere that he even appeared on TV talking about some of the murders that he himself had committed, all the time acting completely innocent and condemning the acts. My research skills aren't the best, maybe because they're in German I can't find anything other than the Club 2 footage. So once again, if anyone has any links to more videos, leave a comment and I'll put them in the description. As for the Club 2 clip, he comes across as friendly, intelligent and unassuming. His choice of clothing is interesting. The pure white suit, perhaps a marker of his innocence. The red flower on his lapel, signifying the one murder that he was convicted of at the time. Then again, maybe I'm reading too much into it and he just has bad fashion sense, I'm not sure. Alice Myers suggests Luka Magnotta. Luka Magnotta was a Canadian model and porn star who, in 2012, uploaded a video to Best Gore titled "One Lunatic, One Ice Pick." The video shows a man named Lin Jun tied to a bed. It then cuts to his beheaded corpse in the same bed, whilst Luka Magnotta stabs it with an ice pick and cuts flesh away with a knife. He then attempts to feed parts of the flesh to his pet dog. Lin Jun's body was later dismembered and body parts were mailed to various schools and police stations. A manhunt was instigated to capture Magnotta, who had fled to Berlin. He was captured in an internet cafe whilst looking up news articles about himself. There's various videos of him, recorded a couple of years before the murder. Most of them are auditions for reality TV shows that he never got.
Alright, my name is Luka Magnotta and I'm 25.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a model.
Okay. Do you want to talk about the other stuff that you do?
Yeah, definitely.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah,
okay,
that's
great.
all totally fine.
Super.
Basically, I do a lot of adult modeling and I do adult films as well, and I'm pretty comfortable in front of the camera, so I'm doing it for a while. And
is it still on now, or?
So.
Yeah, it's always on.
Do I just keep going? Or?
But don't worry about it. Like, don't even think
okay.
about these guys. Yeah.
Okay, my name's Luka, and I'm a bisexual, and I like to sleep with both men and women, obviously, and I feel comfortable completely with both. And it's like 50-50 for me. Actually, it's a bit more. It's like 60% men and 40%. Yeah.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Luka.
You're very welcome.
These are really good comments. Yep.
Well, I tend to have a lot of male partners, and a lot of people assume that, you know, I'm gay because I have a lot of male partners. And when I tell them, you know, I see...
What comes across to me is Lucas's utter lack of personality. He's like a mannequin that can talk. He was obsessed with making himself famous, and probably due to his wooden personality, he had to invent various sensational stories about himself and spread them online. In 2007, he spread a rumour that he was in a relationship with convicted murderer Karla Homolka, and it actually landed him a TV interview with The Sun.
And it's all because of this whole rumour of you dating Karla Homolka. This is the thing that's...
The rumors destroyed my life, basically, and I've been receiving death threats. My address is posted, that's why I had to move. I want my Pomeranian back. It was taken out of my SUV. I'm about to have a nervous breakdown here. My reputation is completely ruined. I just want everybody to set. I want to set the record straight that me and her have absolutely no connection. I go in to see.
After this small taste of fame, he resorted to increasingly extreme methods of getting attention. This escalated to him posting videos of himself suffocating kittens to death. These videos garnered him the kind of notoriety that he'd craved all along, and it would lead to him filming the murder of Lin Jun. The TV appearances aren't all that interesting, but it lets us see the kind of charmless narcissist that Magnotta really was. A person who craved fame, didn't have the talent to get it naturally, and would murder a man to achieve it. Johnny B. Twat suggested Mitchell Quay. Mitchell Quay strangled his wife to death in December 1998 after discovering that she wanted a divorce. He then cut her body into pieces and buried them in different places around the Southport area in England. For 18 months following the murder, Mitchell made many TV and radio appearances, appealing for information concerning his missing wife and denying allegations that he'd murdered her.
You know, you've got this finger of suspicion pointing at you. You've got this big question mark over your head, and I mean, I know you've featured on local television and you've been interviewed there. And obviously the question has to be put, and I know what your answer's going to be, but I mean, did you kill her?
No. No, I just wish someone had listened to me.
He became known as the Smiling Killer because of the sinister way he would slyly grin when asked if he had killed her. It's thought that he became obsessed with media attention, relishing in his own brazenness. His desire for publicity became so great that he invited a documentary crew into his home to film his life with his 2 children.
And I saw her, I was like, oh, God. I thought, oh, she's gorgeous, and I fell in love. And from that night on, we were never apart. That was it.
This is where the most telling footage comes from. He plays the part of a man whose wife walked out on him, leaving him to raise 2 children alone, whilst the world outside wrongly accuses him of murder.
Me having to do this, leave me with the kids. I would piss on her if she was on fire.
And just say again, and it's not a stupid question, it's a very serious question. Did you kill Lindsay?
Wait and find out. Just wait and find out.
All the time, that cold, dead smile on his face never changes. And the things he says just seem really callous now that we know what really happened.
I mean, I know they're clutching at straws now, like, but what do they think? I shagged her to death or something? Do you know what I mean? I'm not a psychopath. Do I look like a psychopath? But what does a psychopath look like? I mean, that's the thing you've got to ask yourself.
Eventually, the police gathered enough circumstantial evidence to charge Mitchell for murder. After 2 days of questioning, he finally admits to killing her, and he agrees to show police where he hid the body parts. He receives a police escort around Southport to show them where he dumped the dismembered remains of his wife's body. And even then, he's eager to make sure the TV cameras are filming him.
I recall quite vividly, it was a murky, depressing, rainy day. He was quite upbeat, looking for the cameras, and was almost celebrating the fact that this is where they are, that's where that is, and that's where the other body is.
Johnny Twat also suggested Ian Huntley, as did Indian Guy and Dark Fruit Dolls. On the 4th of August 2002, Ian Huntley invited 2 schoolgirls, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, into his home and murdered them, drowning one girl in his bath and suffocating the other. He was a caretaker at their school, a familiar face to the girls, which was why he was able to convince them to come inside his house. When the girls were reported missing, Huntley was one of the first people who volunteered to help search for them. He also appeared in numerous TV interviews.
Ian Huntley here is a familiar figure. Evening, Ian. You're the school caretaker. The girls, Jessica and Holly, would know you, and they saw you on the front doorstep. What went on?
Well, I don't know the girls. I stood on the front doorstep grooming my dog down. She'd run away and come back a bit of a mess. They just came across and asked how Miss Carr was, as she used to teach them at St Andrews. I just said she weren't very good, as she hadn't got the job. And they just said, please tell her that we're very sorry. And off they walked in the direction of the library over there.
He seems eager to mention the fact that he was washing his dog in this clip. Something about how he inserts this fact into the conversation, even though it has nothing to do with the story, it just feels off to me. One of the things that incriminated Huntley in the murders was the fact that he had thoroughly washed his car shortly after the girls had gone missing, ripping out the lining of the boots and replacing it with carpet. Perhaps he included this detail about his dog so that it would give him a reason why he had cleaned his car so thoroughly if he was questioned by the police. Even more disturbing is the interview given by Maxine Carr. Carr was Huntley's girlfriend and she knew about the murders. She'd covered for Huntley by giving a false alibi to the police.
This is something I'll probably keep for the rest of my life, I think. It's what Holly gave me on the last day of term. She was very, very upset because I didn't get my job, and that's the kind of girl she was. She was just lovely, really lovely.
That's really very sweet, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whilst they were editing the video, the producers of the show noticed that Maxine was referring to the girls in the past tense, despite their deaths not being reported yet. This would be reported to the police and would be used in evidence against her. Once again, there isn't much footage of Huntley's TV appearances online. He did do quite a few interviews before being accused of the murders, so once again, if any more footage comes to light, I'll put it in the description. Nick Elvis Channel suggested Peter Madsen. Madsen was a famous Danish inventor and engineer, the subject of numerous documentaries and interviews. He had established his own company called RML Space Labs, whose goal was to construct and launch a manned spacecraft. He had also built 3 submarines. His most recent sub, UC-3 Nautilus, was scheduled to be part of an exhibition at the Bornholm Island in August 2017. A journalist named Kim Wall was writing a story about the Nautilus, and she was offered a private trip with Madsen aboard the submarine the day before the exhibition. Kim Wall and Peter Madsen set off together in the Nautilus at 7 PM on the 10th of August. At 11 AM the following morning, an SOS call was made. The Nautilus had sank and Peter Madsen was rescued. He'd managed to escape from the sinking sub, but Kim was nowhere to be seen. Madsen was immediately taken into custody. He claimed that he'd dropped Kim off on shore before the sinking, but nobody had seen her since. Police suspected that he deliberately sank the vessel to hide some sort of foul play. This footage shows him immediately after the rescue being taken in for questioning.
Jeg har det fint. Nå, det er godt. Lidt ked af det. Er du ked af det? Nå, det er jo klart. Ja. Og sige, Nautilus gå ned var ekstremt, men det er fint nok. Har du hængt ude hele natten? Jamen, jeg var bare på en øvetur, hvor jeg legede med forskellige ting på ubåden, og så opstod der en fejl på min ballasttank.
10 days later, a female torso washes up on shore. The chest had been punctured multiple times to allow gases to escape and prevent it from floating to the surface. There were knife wounds to the genitals that a post-mortem examination concluded had been inflicted shortly before death. DNA testing proved that the torso belonged to Kim Wall. Divers were sent out to search the seabed and they recovered bags containing Kim's head and legs. Madsen had brutally murdered Kim Wall whilst aboard the Nautilus, tying her up before beating and stabbing her, finally killing her by slitting her throat and then cutting up her body. What we see here is a man who committed these acts just hours before and has no remorse. Psychiatric evaluation identified Madsen as a narcissistic psychopath, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. He comes across as really pleasant in all of his TV appearances, but 1 or 2 things he says now seem slightly sinister in retrospect.
It's all components that add up to become the launch vehicle. And one has to understand that the only way to develop anything like this is to cut it up into bits and pieces, a steam generator. He lost a leg in the landing. But other than that, actually Randy was intact afterwards, and the leg has been bolted back on.
Honeybee86 suggested someone who was on a VH1 dating reality show who murdered his girlfriend. Cowboy Worm was able to provide more details. The man's name was Ryan Jenkins and he appeared on a show called Megan Wants a Millionaire. I think I remember considering this case for the original video, but then not being able to find any clips from the actual show. There is some footage from Megan Wants a Millionaire, but not much with Ryan Jenkins, and most of them are just really bad quality, so I probably didn't include it for that reason. Megan Wants a Millionaire was one of them shows where a bunch of guys all move into a house and they try to win over some woman. It's kind of a similar format to The Bachelor, I think. I don't know, I don't watch these kind of shows. On the 2009 season, one of the contestants was a real estate investor called Ryan Jenkins. The show was recorded in February 2009, but it wasn't broadcast until August that year. Jenkins had come third in the show, and in the meantime he'd married a model named Jasmine Fior. On 15th of August 2009, a female body was found stuffed into a suitcase and dumped in an alleyway at Buena Park, California. Her teeth had been torn out and the fingers removed to prevent identification. Police were only able to identify the body by looking at the serial numbers on her breast implants. The corpse was Jasmine Fior. Ryan Jenkins was the only suspect in the murder, but he killed himself before he could be prosecuted. This all happened right in the middle of Megan Wants a Millionaire being broadcast. The show was cancelled mid-season out of respect for Jasmine's family. As I said before, there aren't many clips from the show. Any with Ryan Jenkins in come from news reports of the murder, so the audio's missing because news reporters were talking over the top. It would be interesting to see some of these episodes, so we could see how Jenkins comes across, but I think these shows are half scripted anyway, so I doubt there would be much to read into the footage. Still, it's an interesting story, and scary to think that a contestant on a dating show could go on to murder his partner. Pew Umri Kolak, I know I'm not pronouncing that right by the way, they suggested Victor Kalivoda, known as the Forest Killer. Victor Kalivoda was a contestant on the Czech version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in 2004. 1 year later, he walked into a forest and shot dead an older couple who were out walking their dog. 3 days later, in the same forest, he shot another man dead. There's no known motive for the killings. It seemed Victor chose them at random. He'd wanted to carry out a mass shooting on the Prague metro. Several times, beginning in 2003, he had gone to the metro with a Glock pistol hid under a newspaper with the intention of shooting dead as many people as he could. Each time he went, he found he didn't have the nerve to carry out the shooting. He was also known to be extremely suicidal, and probably these shootings would have been his attempt to go out in a blaze of terror. Finding it too difficult to shoot people, he then started to practice on farm animals, shooting cows point blank in the head so that he would get used to the act of killing. From these practice runs, it seems he then moved on to the forest shootings. I believe that he still intended to carry out the metro shootings, and these murders were carried out to prepare himself for the act. It's right in between the failed metro shootings and the forest murders that he appeared on Millionaire. It seems odd that a man so hell-bent on committing atrocities would want to go on TV and win money. Perhaps the TV appearance was purely to let his face be broadcast, an attempt to increase his notoriety so that he would be known when he did eventually commit the crimes. During the show he comes across as very blank and introverted. He barely smiles, even when winning huge amounts of money. He does laugh a couple of times, but compared to the other contestants, he just seems a bit emotionally stunted.
Tak nechť se vám to líbí, máte to mít a 320 000 k tomu. Nervíčky trošku proběhly.
I don't speak Czech, so I can't tell you what he's actually saying, but his body language is quite interesting. He seems more depressed than anything else. Then again, his introverted manner could just be stage fright. All in all, apart from his lack of emotional reaction, he seems fairly intelligent and friendly. He's the very picture of the kind of unassuming person who turns out to be a cold-blooded killer. Kiki Jensen suggests somebody who was on Wife Swap and then went on to murder his mother and sibling. The guy's name was Jacob Stockdale, and he appeared with his family in a 2008 episode of Wife Swap. I'm pretty sure everyone knows what Wife Swap is, but just in case someone hasn't seen it, Wife Swap is a show where two very different families swap wives for 2 weeks. A lot of the time these reality shows exaggerate or even fictionalize elements, so I'm not sure exactly how accurate the portrayal of the Stockdale family was, but in the show they come across as an extremely strict, devoutly religious family that kept their children on a very tight leash. 9 years after this recording, he would take a shotgun and murder his mother Catherine and his younger brother James. This mugshot was taken a year after the slayings, His face looks a bit distorted because he also turned the gun on himself but somehow survived a shotgun blast to the face. He had to have extensive facial reconstruction and brain surgery before he could face trial. Jacob doesn't really feature much in the show himself.
I've never been on a date. There's better ways to find out about girls than dating.
He is there in most of the family scenes, but mostly in the background. His older brothers and his father seem to do most of the talking. One thing I noticed though is he was 15 when this episode was made, but he looks a lot younger. This could be a strong indicator that his sheltered upbringing wasn't just dramatised for the show. The boy's life seems to mostly consist of doing farm work and household chores in return for tokens which they can cash in for certain privileges like listening to the radio. They aren't allowed girlfriends and they spend their weekends performing in a family bluegrass group. Ironically, the father talks a lot about how they moved from the city for the country life to get away from guns and violence.
We used to live in the city, they were shooting and killing. Now we're out here on the farm and we are just chilling.
The day we moved, we heard gunshots in our neighborhood, and I knew we had made the right decision.
The mother comes across as completely unwilling to change. By the end of the show, she seems to have learnt nothing from her time with the other family and goes right back to putting the kids under the exact same strict routine. Whether or not he had any particular animosity towards his mother and younger brother isn't known. The other family members weren't home at the time, so maybe he would have killed them too. He pleaded not guilty by way of insanity, and he seems to have escaped the death penalty because of it. It is creepy to watch this episode now when you know the tragic events that followed it. It's easy to see how a regime like this could mess with a kid's head. It serves as a warning to overly strict parents everywhere. Thank you for watching this episode, and a huge thanks to everyone who made suggestions. If I left out anyone's suggestions, I apologise. I tried to find as many as I could in the comments, but I might have missed a couple. And there's probably more killers that made TV appearances too, so if you know of any more, leave them in the comments and maybe I'll get round to putting them in a future video. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. I've set up a Subscribestar page. It's a bit like Patreon but without the censorship. I'm not really sure how I feel about this kind of crowdfunding. I did have a Patreon a few years ago and I closed it down because I felt a bit conflicted about getting money from people. But recently, almost all my videos are getting demonetized. I'm trying to turn YouTube into a full-time career so I can make videos more frequently. So my options are either to crowdfund or to do those really annoying sponsored ads that I can't stand in videos. If you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link in the description. I'd really appreciate it. I'll try it out for a while and see how it goes. If people want to support my content, then that'll be great. If not, then no hard feelings. I kind of understand how people feel about crowdfunding in general. Even if I can't make it into a career, I'm not going to suddenly stop making videos again. I'm not going to suddenly go away. Anyway, that's enough e-begging. If you want more content like this video, check out the first two I did in the series. There'll be a link in the end card. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, goodbye.